Hello, pod smashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
Edgy Bit Pod Smash,
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. We are your hosts,
I'm Termite, I'm Penguin.
and I am Termite. What was in your mouth when you said that?
Just water. I was just taking a sip of my drink and I was like, crap, I have to say something here.
I don't think it's ever happened on our show. This is episode 247. I don't think it's ever happened where you tried to talk while drinking. We are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games. And tonight we are talking about
Part 3, the last part of what I call our non-gamer series. This is a topic I'm passionate about. This has been a very different kind of series. Normally we do random. Normally if we have a series, we'll like randomly intersperse the entries pepper them throughout our other various topics. But this one we were like, let's knock them all out 3 in a row, make it feel like a cohesive single episode while still also identifiably being different episodes. But yes, it is our part 3 of non-gamer series. Tonight we're going to be pretty much addressing the idea of what does it look like. What will the gaming industry look like if more people buy into this idea that games are for everyone and start actually playing games as if they're for everyone or partaking of games? What kind of change do you think the industry will bring us about? So we'll be answering that question and other questions related to it tonight. But first, we are where gaming goes to grab a beer. And I think you are drinking something, even if I am not.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually drinking a Gosling's ginger beer. So it's non-alcoholic, which is wild.
Huzzah.
Sometimes we do that. And if you listened to last week's episode, we weren't feeling too well. My specific issue was kind of stomach related and I felt off. So I'm drinking this ginger beer in an attempt to quell that. But funnily enough, I'm looking at the ingredients list because usually I read these cans. It's because, beer and there's always fun little things to read. There's nothing on here other than it's Gosling's since 1806. And the ingredients are carbonated water, high fructose corn syrup, natural ginger beer flavor, citric acid, gum acacia, or I don't know how to say that, ester gum, non-alcoholic soda. So there's no actual ginger.
List?
I did. But the reason why I even did that was
to realize I was looking over the notes and just kind of tuning you out, and then I popped back in for a second to realize you were listing ingredient list. I was like, "What are you doing?"
I prefaced that with I don't have anything interesting to read on the can that I would normally have, with a beer because they always have fun things to read.
So I'm drinking a seltzer water. And I want to read the ingredients now, too. Filtered carbonated water and natural flavors. That's all I got. Sorry, guys.
Perfect. That's awesome.
No gum acacia. Yeah, no, we're for people who may not understand the context, we did double up. We have Termite has some absences that we're trying to work around. And so we had to double up recordings this week. So the day that we chose to record 2 episodes in a row happened to also be Memorial Day, where we both had very busy days with family and kids and drinking outside of the podcast. So we both got to the table and we're like, oh God, I drank a coffee in the last episode. And now I'm like hydrating between episodes. So it's like water. So yeah, that's been a fun day. So
yeah. I was just laughing here with the ingredients list of it's a ginger beer, but there's no actual ginger in it. So
yes, I see how you find that amusing. Yeah. And like in hindsight, I had caught all that subconsciously, but just my conscious brain was trying to wrap my mind around the fact that you're like xanthan gum. I'm like, what?
Like what? What is happening?
How do you know that those things aren't ginger? Like, have you ever seen the thing where it was like, it was like some viral thing, and basically he handed a dude a list of all these like big sounding chemicals and was like, do you want your kids consuming these chemicals? And do you know what products these chemicals are in? And the guy's like, oh no, that sounds awful. Oh, what is that? I don't even know what that is. That must be terrible. And then the dude's like, that is just the chemical composition of an apple.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you know that those things aren't just different funny scientific, or not funny, but scientific words for ginger?
I mean, it says natural ginger beer flavor instead of just ginger. Yeah, that's how I know.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm not even concerned with. Yeah, I have zero concern for citric acid and gum acacia and ester gum or whatever. High fructose corn syrup is a problem, but that's not in my diet. So Like, I don't really care.
Yeah, cool. You just trying to calm your tummy. That's what I'm doing too. Seltzer water, it calms my tummy. So,
Yep.
all right, we're gonna skip favorite things. But is there anything you want to chat about for the day? Since I know you.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Sorry, it
Okay.
took me a
Or you have
second to.
different
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, totally different. So we are in what the industry kind of is sort of unofficially calling like backlog something. Like this is a space like
It didn't feel
nothing.
like it was gonna be like that. 2022 started, and it felt like it was gonna be nonstop roller coaster of games, and
Everything
then
got delayed.
delay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I wanted to chat about was what. Woo, and I'm burpy because this thing is burpy. What are you playing that's like your backlog? Do you feel like you're catching up at all? Are you involved in
No,
any
D and
like
D. D&D is my backlog. I'm catching up on
okay.
all the years I didn't play in Dungeon Master D&D. That's it, man. Like it's been dominating so many of my evenings, and I'm not salty about it. Like I love it. I'm having a great time. But my video gaming has tanked. I think I I played video games one night last week. One
Wow.
night. I
What about during the
played
day?
Ghostwire Tokyo. I don't have time at work. Work's kicked up too, so I don't have time. And if I do have free time at work, I'm actually usually working on the D&D campaign. So yeah, I played it, but I have been playing Ghostwire Tokyo. I nabbed it on a sale a few weeks back, and I'm actually pleased with that. I mentioned it in the last week. So last week you can listen to that episode, and I talk about it a little bit more. I platinumed, finally finished Mass Effect 3. So I platinumed all three of those games. And so I finally was able to uninstall it. Great, wonderful. I did fire up a little bit of Elden Ring a couple weeks ago just to get like the taste of it a little bit back in my mouth now that I was finished with my main projects. And then I have ambitions at some point this summer to at least finish the first point run through of Nier Replicant. And
Cool.
I also, now that I've been playing D&D, I want to get my hands back on trying to appreciate Divinity Original Sin 2. So those are kind of the ambitions. So Ghostwire Tokyo's priority number one because it's a quick and dirty and easy platinum. And newer, feels more fun. Doesn't feel like I'm playing a dated game. And then at some point near Replicant this summer, and Divinity Original Sin 2, and shoot, there's another backlog game. I've got like a Mortal Shell waiting in the wings. At
Nice.
some point, I should probably finish Dark Souls 2, even though my motivation for it has tanked. And crap, there was another game. I got to finish Arceus, so I'm glad we're playing that on Wednesday or last Wednesday. Glad we played it last Wednesday. 2 Wednesdays ago? Goodness gracious. I don't know how time works anymore when we're doubling up on episodes.
Yep.
So Arceus is on my list of things to play, and so is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. So I want to fire that up again. It's on the Switch. So I've got a lot of backlog stuff, and what would have been a moderately reasonable list, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, now I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get through all of those and also at least sustain my current level of D&D involvement and commitment. So maybe it'll get easier as I get more used to rolling out those, modules. And I've heard of that, eventually it becomes kind of a well-oiled machine, and that what I'm probably experiencing now is sort of the pain points of DM growth. But
yeah, time is finite, so it's occupying a lot of your time.
Yeah, for real.
You can't create new time. I wish we could. So it'd be awesome. I've gone back after finishing Horizon Forbidden West, and I went back to finish Kena, Bridge of Spirits. I wanted to get the platinum in it, knowing I had the Master Mode only trophy to do. And I actually found on PSN profiles that there's another glitch that we can use to skip the playthrough and get the platinum. So that was an afternoon, if that, maybe 20 minutes, and I had a platinum. So from there...
Cheese!
Yeah, I love it. I love the cheese. I'm here for it.
You would have been fine. It's way easier than Elden Ring. You platinumed Elden Ring. It's easier Master Mode.
But
no,
then I bought
I understand
exactly
the whole time.
time.
Yeah. I would have done it too.
Short
100%. 100%.
I bought Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, and that's kind of my main game right now that I'm playing. I beat the main story, and like you have to replay everything again, unlock all the characters, and do all the stuff. It's massively huge, and I'm not super motivated to play it constantly like other games, so I will not burn that down quickly. I've gone back and hit Skyrim on PS3 lately and got some more trophies and made some more progress in the story. That game is shockingly good. Like, every time I get back, I'm just immediately, I don't feel like I'm playing a retro game. It runs like dirt on PS3. It's awful. Like, the frame rate's terrible and the graphics are terrible. And like, obviously it's aged, but like the music and the voice acting and the story are all so good that all the bad stuff goes away. So I'm enjoying that. I don't know if I talked too much about it on the podcast way back when. I had a PS3 that could play PS2 games. It was the quote fat model. It was a launch PS3 console. It had a Call of Duty Ghost disc in it because I was playing through that campaign. I enjoy the Call of Duty campaigns. I don't regularly play Call of Duty. I don't keep up with it, so I'm woefully behind. But I wanted to play something. So a long time ago, I picked that back up. I went and bought another copy. It was $2.50. So I'm playing Call of Duty Ghosts, and I'm probably be done with that pretty quickly. Went back and dabbled in Gran Turismo 7, picked up some things, and mostly where I have been feeling the most progress on a backlog is I finished Luigi's Mansion 3 finally. And it came out in like 2019 and Halloween, and I finished it. So that was fun. And I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I'm not going to review it right here, right now. And I'm also towards the end of Paper Mario Origami King, which was a birthday present from my brother. Shout out T-Bone. I don't remember exactly what year, but I've been sitting on that one for a while. So I'm almost done with that. So I've got a lot of Nintendo Switch games that I've been dying to get back and finish, and I'm doing that. So next up there will be like new Pokemon Snap, and I would like to go back to Hyrule Warriors Calamity Ganon Edition, whatever that's called. Age of Calamity, that's the word. And keep burning down some Switch stuff. So that's what I'm playing. A lot of stuff. I'm like everywhere. Yeah. I'm bouncing all over the place, across genres, and like... Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing that in my head, but I'm not actually doing that in real life just because of D&D. It was funny because you're like, I wish we could make more time. And I was like, yeah, that'd be nice. I'd probably just end up working on D&D stuff, though. Like, that's where my hyper focus is right now. But as an ADHD person, I promise you, give me a few months and I'll be like, all right, I'll put it down to a manageable amount. And then I'll just go back into whatever game I want to get into, or maybe not. Maybe this is my life now. Maybe I'm just a dungeon master, and that's my identity.
No more gaming.
Sorry, guys, not a gamer anymore. I'm a dungeon master.
All right. Hey, there's a new host spot opening on 80-bit Pod Smash.
Ouch! Oh man,
no.
Kicking me out of the show. I know.
I'm totally joking. What game is on? What's your next new game that's not out yet? What's the first game you're going to buy this year from now, or the second half of the year?
What is sorry, the first new game. I in my mind think the one that comes to mind is probably Forspoken. So it's like not until October of games we know are coming out this year. I mean, currently God of War is still slated to come out this year, even though we expect it will be delayed.
Yeah.
I'm certainly gonna get Forspoken. I'm certainly gonna. There's another one in my mind. I'm just blanking on what it is. Like
Lord of the Rings Golem?
No, not that.
That's September. Splatoon 3, September.
No.
Gotham Knights, October.
It's a big maybe. Kind of want to see how it is first.
And that's it.
That's it. Yep. So Forspoken, that's the one.
Yeah.
That's my next game. That sucks. That's so long. And of course it's October too, which I have designs for October, Bloodborne designs, both
right
on my PlayStation and on my table, Dungeon Master table, because I want to do the Bloodborne 5e compendium, and I want to do like 4 one-shots of that.
Yeah.
But sorry, that's a whole different can of worms. So yeah, of course, October will already be busy for different reasons, but it's like it'll go from just nothing but backlog to then actual stuff in October. Annoying.
Yeah, that's what. But it's awesome. I'm so happy there's not a lot to play because I'm catching up and it's great. You changed your lane. I'm still gaming. I'm messing with you.
Yeah,
the next game on
that's true.
The next game on my list is June 3rd. Lilymo coming out with Super Perils of Baking, and that is Colin Moriarty's kind of gaming venture. They made Hebroxia and Twin Breakers, and now their newest game. It's called Super Perils of Baking. It's like a 16-bit retro platformer, and it's coming out June 3rd. So that's going to have like a super approachable platinum, not a cheesy, easy one, but an approachable one. So I'll probably do that. And I don't know how long that it's going to be. And then Sonic Origins comes out on June 23rd with 4 of the original Sonic games. So that'll occupy some early summer. And then there's 2 games with no official release dates, but they both said summer. And that is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection, which has 13 games I am dying to play. And then the new Shredder's Revenge, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as well, which is, they both say summer, no dates. So that will be my summer. That's what I'm going to buy immediately when it comes out. So that's my June and July. So yeah, I have a lot of 14. I have 2 flights to Hawaii and back. So that's 4, like out to Hawaii and then returning. That's 2, right? And so I do that twice. 4 14-hour flights on an airplane. And I think I'm going to start Persona 4. and I'm going to get into
nice.
on my
Yeah.
Vita. So that'll be fun.
Cool. All right. Well, we are gonna skip favorite things. So playing
You already
those
said that.
games, consider that. Yeah. Well, I'm saying it again
Okay.
because in case people are confused as to why we're moving on to our last segment before the show, which is DLC. Downloadable content is what DLC stands for, and it is a segment of our show where we have a conversation we would normally have about video games, or maybe not about video games, but kind of tangentially related to our topic, or not related at all. Ha ha ha! I don't know where that came from. 2 episodes in a row. I'm getting a little loopy, guys.
I like it.
I need to go to bed. So let's get through this fast. Tonight's DLC is related to the idea of things changing the more people get involved with it. So what is an example? I want you to talk about a non-video game related example of something that was niche or nerdy or kind of exclusive that you saw change as it became more popular. And let's try to pick examples that are both positive as well as potential examples that are negative. But what's something that you saw that you were like, oh, this felt different, and then people got involved in it, and then it changed, right? It changed in one way or another. So yeah, what's something? I have an example.
Well, I think I have an answer
Okay,
without your example.
Go.
If you want to share your example, you're more than welcome
good.
to do so. Okay.
Go,
I didn't know if
you
your
go
example
first.
was like helping me come up with one or not.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was never. Just go. We're good.
I'm thinking of Magic the Gathering or trading card games in general. I think
Sure, yeah.
Pokemon brought the trading card game age barrier down so that younger kids got into it. When I was in, it was in 1996 timeframe, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when Wizards of the Coast did Pokemon trading card games, and that was getting what would then become a major audience to play Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh cards later in life, their exposure younger. And when you expose children younger, you're just growing your audience. You're just growing your future. So like back then, trading card games were super niche and nerdy, but then by the time I got through college, there was like almost chess club, but there was clubs like adjacent to trading card game battles and tournaments, and like it's a giant competition. It's kind of like esports now, and you can watch them online. You can like watch, it's everywhere. And so like Hearthstone was the digital version of that evolution of like continuing to expand that audience of trading card games. And so I think that has become more normalized, that like I moved into this neighborhood and like all the kids have some Pokemon cards somewhere, and like it's all over the place. So trading card games in general is my example of what was super niche, and now is everywhere.
Yeah, I've got 2 examples. I've got I'm going to say the Star Wars fandom. I'm young enough that I remember growing up before the prequels. And I remember, people talking about I was old enough to remember like how people talked about it and what people were excited about it. And there was the extended universe culture, right? Where it was all this idea of like taking what it's kind of like what I think Disney imagined they would do, but were incapable of doing because they're a massive soulless corporation. But back when it was just Lucas, right? It was like they were making games, they were making card games, trading card games, like you were talking about too. They were writing books, and they were like expanding upon George Lucas's mythos and with different authors and different inputs. And it was this massively cool thing, and people were overall like kind of cool about it. But what happened during that time, though, is that then Star Wars became a different thing in people's minds, I think, than maybe what it actually was. And what I mean by that then is like, and it did expand in popularity in that time, so that by the time then the prequels came out, I think there was suddenly a massive change in the way the fandom viewed Star Wars. And suddenly people realized that like, instead of being this like cool movie series from kind of like experimental director, it was now suddenly this thing. It was this thing, and everybody, and the thing about Star Wars that changed is what used to be everyone's opinion about Star Wars was, hey, this is awesome, this is like my favorite thing, suddenly became everyone has an opinion about Star Wars, and very few of those opinions are any good, right? And that was before the internet, so I can't even say that was the internet. That was just the growing popularity of Star Wars over time as it began to filter down into generations. What once was this kind of cool, and it was popular, of course, when it came out, but like what once was this thing that like, I mean, I asked my dad, I was like, do you remember going to see Star Wars? Like, and he's like, yeah, like I was actually talking like, what was that experience like? So like, but like, our parents' generation were like the ones to go in and see Star Wars, and they all like taught it to their kids, and it was just a slowly thing that grew in popularity across the generations, with each generation having its own take on it over time. And then suddenly the prequels came out, and it was like everybody must hate on it because everyone's opinion is different about what this should be. And then the internet came along and exacerbated it and made it this just awful, awful toxic fandom, to the point where it's just like you can't, like, talking about Star Wars is almost as like toxic as talking about World War II on the internet, right? Like you're guaranteed to be called Hitler at some point, no matter like where you're talking about it. It's just like you're guaranteed someone is going to call you either Hitler or Space Hitler in either one of those conversations. So like that's one example of, I think, as it grew in popularity, it kind of became something different. But
that's an interesting. I never even thought about that. When you bring the novels and like the comics and all the things before the prequels had come out, like in the 80s, and that we didn't have the internet, we have streaming services or studios spinning out new content all the time, and so you really did, like, the imagination side of the books almost grew into more popularity than the actual movies, because the movies were only three movies, 6 hours, and that was it. And so there was a massive amount of content to consume, filling in a ton of story gaps and chronology. And it almost became like a fantasy in and of itself, adjacent to like Dungeons and Dragons. It's like this massive lore. And then this movie comes out.
More in people's imaginations than it did.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
And then
so
completely
by the time
separate from LucasArts. Completely separate Lucasfilm.
I'm not trying to be apologetic towards the prequels. They had very significant faults that were their own, right? Like that were independent of what the fans thought. But I think that their reception was exacerbated by this.
Yeah, that's it. I never thought about that. That's exactly what happened, because the books and all of the lore and all of the stuff happened outside of Hollywood. So like Lucasfilms they didn't care. Lucasfilms only looked at the movies and then the prequel, right? That was George Lucas's thing. Now he signed off on some of the content to like give the rights to people to write, but when you work with so many different authors to do so much different stuff to make all the different content, you don't grasp all of that and try to incorporate. It'd be an impossible Herculean task.
Not in the same way that the fans do, exactly.
Right,
they're
exactly.
The consumers, they're the target audience, exactly.
Yeah, and so episode 1 comes out with the vision that kind of shaped their first trilogy, maybe, and wow, yeah,
it's
great.
certainly the vision. Yay! Hopefully, I blew other people.
That was awesome.
Yeah. I would say then in contrast, though, I think an example, and again, I think people are going to be sick of me saying the letters D&D, but like I wasn't even a part of this, but like I am one of these people who has hopped in after it's exploded in popularity. But I've been able to see in hindsight like how like I've loved talking to people about the history of D&D, how it started, and like learning that, because like Gary Gygax's vision for D&D is very different from what Jeremy Crawford, who's the principal designer now for Wizards of the Coast, what his vision is for it. As so much change, not just with 5e, which 5e, by the way, is only like 6 or 7 years old. It came out in like 2015, I think. But then also like it just exploded in the last couple of years in popularity thanks to the pandemic. So like people playing online, that is like a fairly recently new thing. And it's crazy to see how I think differently people approach the experience as opposed to back in the day, especially just you can see it in the editions. Like there were 3rd edition spun off into Pathfinder because it was such a bigger stickler for the rules, whereas later editions were like, no, like forget the rules, focus more on the storytelling experience. And so being able to see it change, and I think that was a change that was positive because it made it more approachable for new people, both new DMs and new players, and also made it something more of a community experience than just like a crunchy nerdy game. And I think that overall has made it just like huge. Like there's entire services now set up online to allow people to hire DMs to play for like a group of new people trying it out for the first time. That's like the fact that there's a lucrative enough service for multiple competing sites to be set up for it means that like, yes, the popularity right now is huge and more people are trying it for the first time. And the result of their participation has already and will continue to shape the next edition of D&D and even the current edition of D&D and how that design happens. So cool. Awesome. Well, it was our DLC, and the reason for it is because it's really closely related to our main topic. So put a pin in those ideas as we move in, but we want to hear what your thoughts are. What is something that you were involved in or maybe not, or maybe you've just observed from the outside looking in, like I did with D&D. But what is an example of something niche or nerdy, or maybe just not that people weren't really into, that changed as it grew in popularity? It could be a sport, it could be a movie, it could be a genre, like right, like a book genre or something. Let me hear from all those readers of those like Amish romance novels. How did that change as it got more
Whoa.
popular with like middle-aged
Whoa.
women housewives? so
Hey.
uh, so anyways, yeah, that's that I guess that's what I want to hear. Is I want to hear from the middle-aged housewives on how the Amish romance novel changed.
Usually I can have like a little quip here and tell you how to get to 80-bit pot, but you kind of took all of that thunder with the Amish
So-
thing going on. So that's funny. I just wanted to add really quick to your thought about D&D. We have major pop culture references to it now, one being Stranger Things because it's fresh. We were talking offline before the show had started about that season dropping, and like Dungeons and Dragons presence in it is awesome, and how it's tying, and that's like Netflix's probably biggest show, like period. Netflix is struggling, like this is their biggest show. It's everywhere, everyone's talking about Stranger Things. And also in the gaming space, we had an entire video game from the Borderlands camp called Wonderlands, and it's all about a game within a game. It's a video game inside characters playing Dungeons and Dragons. So it's in mainstream culture now, and it's interesting, it's cool. So you're right, it's coming up and it's getting bigger. So tell us what you think over at 80bitpodsmash.com. Or it's our landing website, 80bitpodsmash.com, with links to Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and Discord as well. You can jump into our chat and let us know what you think, and you can provide all of your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, and ideas, as well as check out our RSS feeds and social platform podcast apps. They always talk about the social stuff. Podcast apps of your choice: Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, etc. You can find links to everything over at 80bitpodsmash.com.
All right, that is great. Let us then talk then about what we're talking about, which is we are, like I said, continuing our non-gamer series, doing part 3, and I called it "The Change You Will Bring." So yes, again, just kind of recap. What we've been doing with this is we are kind of addressing both. We're addressing both categories, right? Both quote gamers and non-gamers, and we're addressing like, hey, gamers, like it is a good thing to get more and more non-gamers into the industry, and this episode is actually dedicated to that particular idea. But also to non-gamers, we want to try to make this series sort of a convincing thing, as to be like, hey, how do you get into gaming and why? What is the value of doing that? And so we really focused on a lot of those ideas in the first episode, is the value of gaming in your life that it could bring. Again, we highlighted the fact that it's like you could go your whole life without playing games and you'll probably be fine. You're not necessarily missing on anything. Like you won't be like an empty or hollow person inside. It's not that crucial. But just because something is crucial doesn't mean it's still not valuable. It still doesn't have value it could bring to your life. It could add to your life. And so so that's kind of the things we talked about a lot of those reasons. We talked about reasons how it's, games have gotten better over the years. There's more varied experiences out there, and what you may think gaming to be, it might not actually be that. And we could probably point many of examples as to assumptions you have that are incorrect. Games, they do bring some utilitarian value. You can learn new skills through games. You can just learn even vocabulary and stuff. Like all that is a thing. And you can connection, community. There's great like community value and intimacy that can be had through playing games. So there's a lot of like solid reasons. We covered that in episode 1. If you want a deeper dive into that, you can check that out. The last week, then part 2, we talked about like, okay, so you're sold, you're convinced. How do you start? Where do you grow? And what does teaching gaming look like for those gamers who have interested parties in their life, and how to cultivate that interest as well. And so we talked about different strategies as to how to do that, and things like familiarizing yourself with controls and menus and stuff like that is kind of a good place to start, and kind of also like learning about your limits, what platforms you want to play on, what games you're looking to play, kind of starting there. And whether or not you want someone to teach you, it's a big question. And then finally, we've been hitting on this. We've been also kind of using this as an opportunity to talk about like, what does it mean to be a gamer versus a non-gamer? And in both episodes, we kind of talk briefly about that. In episode 1, we talk about how a gamer is someone who identifies as a gamer. So even if you play, it doesn't matter if you play games every day and listen to podcasts and are super involved in the industry, or if you just like play games on your cell phone occasionally. If you call yourself a gamer, you're a gamer. Consequently, it doesn't matter if you don't play games or if you do play games every day. If you have a reason for not calling yourself a gamer, you're not a gamer, right? So, and then even within non-gamers, there's a whole like level of different kind of, involvement with games. So we
Mhm.
cover that in episode 2. So yeah, anything else you want to hit on from the
Yes,
last 2
one thing.
episodes?
One
Yeah,
thing
go.
is that if you and you audience person listening to us now made it this far into this episode, realized, oh, we're in part 3 of something. They're not sequential. Don't worry about going back and catching up. We've just recapped what we have discussed, but they don't like they're not in order. You could actually listen to 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, whatever order you would like. So hang out with us here
Right.
anyway. You
They're
don't need
sort
to
of
pause, stop,
individual
and go back.
topics that are just connected to one another. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Cool.
don't worry
Awesome.
about missing or catching up. Just hang out. You're here. Let's go.
Cool. Awesome.
Let's do that.
So with each of these episodes, we've started off talking about these terms, gamer and non-gamer. So I wanted to add one final nuanced question and sort of start as our jumping off point. So as we've talked about before, the term gamer has baggage. So my first question then to kick off this idea of change, should we abolish the term gamer? Should we get rid of it? Or if not
Ooh.
get rid of it, what do we do about this term that may have baggage to people and may no longer be an accurate description of how they
Man,
identify in relation to
rough.
games?
Yeah, it's a tough question. And I'm going to use an aspect of my life to kind of get my thoughts out here to externally
Sure.
process. And I don't know,
Yeah.
have an answer right now, but I might. So as I run, I'm a runner, right? And their word runner, you throw that around. In the running community, there are just as many spectrums of ways with which you can consider yourself a runner or not that there are in gaming. And oftentimes when I like to race, I take running pretty seriously. Like I'm more than a casual runner. So there's different nuances, right? So when I find someone who likes running as well and I start chatting with them about it, there's almost like this back and forth where you're assessing, are they on the same wavelength as me and this topic or in this thing? And it's like, do they run as much as I do? What kind of runner are they? And then once you know where they're at, you know how to engage them and how to establish the connection. And like, if you're in a positive way about it, then you would be way more inclusive and you can make thousands of friends really quickly in the running community. So I approach the same with gamer. There are baggages to both the running. I mean, people are like, oh gosh, he's one of these like
He's a
marathoner
runner.
cults. Like,
Oh, make
yeah,
him
he always talks
stop.
about, yeah, like, oh my gosh. And
He's gonna make me feel
people,
bad about my soft, flabby body. I don't want to.
yeah. And then with gamers, it's like, oh geez, you're wasting all your
He's
time playing
racist.
games.
He's sexist. He's
Yeah.
lazy couch potato. Absolutely
Yep.
right. Like,
And
that's
so
kind
they
of the
both have their
baggage.
bad and they both have their good, and they both have a ridiculous amount of
And they both
nuance.
have their neutral, right? Like a lot of just neutral. Like nobody
Yes.
cares, right?
Ton,
Like
yeah.
or nobody should care, right? Like
Yep.
it's a thing, and it's
So should
yeah.
we abolish the word gamer? Only if there is a like spectrum of words we could use to describe what type of gamer you are, like easily, and I don't think that's possible.
All right, so,
So
we
I would
need
say
the
no.
Enneagram. We need the Enneagram for gaming, right? Like,
Yeah. There you go. Enneagram type.
where it's just where it's completely arbitrary. No, yeah, no, and for certain, I don't think we should abolish any words, right? Like abolishing words
Well, yeah,
is
it's
scary 1984.
we're
stuff
not
that-
talking literal
I
here.
know, and so yeah, but for anyone who heard that and was like, they're communists, like, I mean, yeah, we actually probably are more communist, but for different reasons than abolishing words. But like, should we stop using the term? So like this, for me, this comes back to this idea that we've talked about before in the podcast of like, should we actually get rid of the moniker of video games in the first place, right? Like, it's hard for me to say, should we continue using the term gamer if like I'm already conflicted about the term video games in the first place. And so then part and parcel with that, if I'm like, okay, well, I've used the term virtual experiences or virtual stories or blah, 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 or basically just separating them and saying like your competitive games, no longer call them competitive video games, call them esports, and your like single player storytelling experiences, call them virtual experiences or virtual stories, right? Like something just, but then again, I'm like, okay, well, but then what do you call people who are into those things? You call them esporties or like verties or like all those sound awful too, right? Like worse than gamer. And it's like, so it's like, what do you, labels suck. Like labeling in general is just hard, but I also understand how useful it can be for shorthand, right? Not everybody has the time to sit there and be like, hi, you, this nuanced individual with competing and various interests and also complex motivations, like, hello, like that's what you are, that's what he is. Like you say that and then it's like, okay, that could mean a million things to everybody, and yes, it's true, but it's also annoying. So understand that like labels are an important thing. So I am a little bit conflicted about this question and I don't know the answer. What I can say is I don't always like identifying as a gamer, and I don't like using the, even sometimes saying the word video games, it's still, it has so much baggage with it that it's hard. I sometimes don't even take myself seriously, even though I'm like a confident person. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I want to tell you about this cool artistic experience that I had with this medium. And then I say to the person, yeah, I was playing this awesome video game. And that even still feels to say, like, no, what I'm trying to get across is this incredible story and the depth and meaning it brought to my life. But the medium itself has so much like negative association with it because of what it used to be and still sometimes is, that it's just like, it feels weird sometimes to say, depending on who I'm talking to, right? Like if I'm talking to you, of
Yeah.
course, like I know you get it, but like I'm trying to tell my mom or my dad, I'm like, how do I sell this right without feeling like a child? And not that they're necessarily making me feel like a child, but it's just the culture around it, right? There's so much culture around it. So I do sometimes wish there was another way of saying like, yeah, I am a person who really likes games because of these reasons, not because of these other reasons that you may think, right? But there's not. So what do you do?
It's like the disc personality of gaming or something. It's like some, like you said, the Enneagrams, a way to identify yourself as a specific type of gamer. I don't know, but I'm with you. So if you're in a mixed company, maybe some strangers that has like a work related thing, you're super professional. It's like business, and like you throw the term out like, what did you guys do this past weekend? Maybe I took off work to play Horizon Forbidden West and I crushed it. I spent like 20 hours over 3 days, which is a very real thing to do.
That was great. Yeah. Good job. Like, more power to you. Like, you should feel
I didn't actually do that, but maybe I did.
Joy. Yeah, sure. Right.
And so like in this hypothetical where you're with a bunch of business professionals and you're talking about like, what did you do this past weekend? And you're like, in your head, you're thinking, how do I articulate that I took off work to experience a video game and not sound like a complete failure at my job? You don't know
if the person's going to be like, oh, that's so awesome, I wish I could do that, versus like, oh my gosh, this person is this kind of person, right? Like,
it's tough.
And I live my life trying not to care what people, it's very important to not necessarily 100% not care what people think, because that is another error. But in things like that are inconsequential, that are like nobody's business, like if it's like, if they are asking me what I did, they're going to get the answer they get. And if they judge me based on that, that's their problem, not mine. Right. So like, I try to live my life with that kind of mindset of like judge me all you want. I'm confident enough. And at the same time, I feel like I'm able to say that while also still understanding that, like, as a rational human being that is able to read social circumstances, I can also understand how there's a bit of insecurity that's still attached to that, right? So it's like I can act one way and still feel the other way on the inside, and that's not a contradiction. It is simply a reality of the situation. And it can get complicated sometimes internally and externally when having those conversations. So I'm just like, So this is why we're having this conversation, though, because the term gamer has baggage, and whether we abolish it or not, the future of what this culture looks like is dependent on now
us
people, like, right, it's dependent on us, and part of that dependency is increased diversity of thought, idea, and desire within the industry and culture. And that only comes if more people get into it that aren't currently into it. So that's why it's related to non-gamers. So what then, our next question then is, what then do newcomers and non-gamers bring to the table of this culture, industry, and the games themselves? What do you bring? Yeah.
Yeah. Fresh perspective. Like, hopefully none of the baggage that comes with it. A wholesome approach to what gaming is. And like, I'm new to this. I just bought a PlayStation and I'm interested in what to play. You see all the posts on Reddit. Like, I just got a Vita. What's the coolest games to play? Or I just got an Xbox. Like, where do I start? What do I get? Or my kid wants to get this console. Like, what do I do? And I love that stuff, because then people have like, so of course it gets toxic like almost immediately because the internet is garbage.
Because the internet.
Because the internet. Yeah. But if you are new to gaming and you know the toxicity is bad and you don't want to engage with it, and you have kind of your defenses are at the all-time high, because you get wore down after years and years and years and years operating in these spaces, and it's easier to slip up and perpetuate the culture and its badness than it would be. And I'm talking about just like online interactions with strangers. I'm not talking about like how to live your life.
Right.
There's so many different ways to attack this question. So what do you bring to the table if you're new to gaming and you're like a full-fledged adult with like kids and jobs and maybe you don't have kids, but you have jobs, partner, and you're living in a city and you don't really have a lot of time. You're busy and you're plugged into the community and doing whatever, like, and you add video games to it, and then someone sees it, and then the way you respond or how you talk about it, or like, I don't know, it's really have an answer. Like, what do newcomers and
yeah.
non-gamers bring to the table? That is a good question.
You are hitting the nail on the head, right? With perspective, right? Like, not only do you bring your personal positionality, your points of view on things, right? I'll say two things. You bring your voice, right? Like, you bring your right. So when there are issues in the gaming industry, how much more powerful would the calls against Bobby Kotick have been if like another 3 million more people were involved, right? But we're making their voices heard, right? Like,
Yep.
I have people in my life that deeply care about the issues around sexual harassment in the workplace that didn't care and wouldn't have spoken up about the Bobby Kotick thing simply because they weren't involved in gaming. And it's like, how disappointing, right? Because those people could have added to the chorus of voices and maybe that number would have made a difference, right? So there's that, but on a less serious tone, there's also taste, right? What do newcomers and non-gamers bring to the table? They bring their taste. And what I mean by that is, like, I think about how my taste has changed because I've been exposed to new games. When we started this podcast, I was still occasionally playing World of Warcraft. Now, I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because I've gotten to see better experiences out there that have changed my taste.
Yep.
And I would never have probably played a Souls-like, right? Or there's a universe out there where I've never played those games and still think entirely differently about them. But like, I have completely 180'd on my perspective on those games because I've like got a chance to play them and had people who were patient with me to teach me them to what to appreciate about them, and then my taste changed. I know I was harping on the Amish romance novels earlier, but like, I imagine that there's probably if you drew a Venn diagram of like people who are into Amish romance novels and people who are into video games, ne'er would the two be likely to meet, and there's probably a very small select where the Venn diagram does meet is a very, very special and interesting individual.
Brain age.
If we were able to like merge those Venn diagrams to make that second one bigger, then maybe we would start to see Amish romance video games. And who knows, maybe they'd be freaking incredible and change my mind again about Amish romance as a genre.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm saying is like, again, unlikely, but you never know. That's my point.
It's a good hypothetical for sure.
Maybe I am missing out on something, and were that taste to be sort of injected into the video game industry, we would see those experiences begin to emerge because that's how capitalism works, and then we would possibly get new experiences that we didn't have before. So, in fact, that's already happened. We've already seen that happen. Like, there are entire genres that came out because people were bold enough to take the risks to make those genres. So I think of the Battle Royale. I think of, the roguelike has existed a lot longer, but it really exploded in popularity the last 10 years. And people were able to were enabled and empowered to make those genres. And then people realized that they liked them. So they wanted more of them. So now there's tons of them.
Yeah. And in the indie space, we have like, it's used pejoratively, but it's not bad. The walking simulator type games that are super heavy story driven, first person or third person, but you just walk through an environment. Like, that's a very new genre. That's entirely like stripping a video game of its like reaction time and stripping it of almost all of its action and just walking a character through a story in a world. Firewatch, Gone Home,
Edith
Finch,
right?
Yeah. Yep. And Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. Like, there's so many of awesome ones, and so that's new too.
And they're good, and they're good games. They exist for a reason. So, as pejorative as that might be, at the end of the day, it's like, no, there are entire people out there that would never ever touch a battle royale game or a first person shooter or an RPG, but they would sit there and like experience a story through an interactive medium like a video game if it was a good enough story. And who cares, right? Like, again, we talked a lot about like games that my wife would play in the last episode. We talked a lot about It Takes Two and my experience playing those games with her. There's that entire genre of walking simulator I bet my wife would love. In fact, I'm now thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, maybe I should get, like, maybe I have Edith Finch. I should install it. Yeah, I was like, maybe I should install Edith Finch. Or like, is Heavy Rain? Heavy Rain's not like
it has
some game elements, but it's
kind of scary, but it's
but I still
ridiculous.
bet she would
Alex loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was bet you
Yeah.
would love. Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's like, and
It's a great game.
those are just as much games as anything else, right? They maybe, well, in my harkening back to my other thought earlier is like, well, maybe that we shouldn't call those games because they're not games, but they're still interactive storytelling experiences that are still considered. They are still using a controller and running on a console. So for all intents and purposes, they're under the current definitions, they're games. So like that would make, we could both still have fun. I would still get my video game sort of, fix, and she would get her story fix, and we would be able to have that experience together, and it would be closer, if not 100% there, to the experience of like playing games together. It would be as close as it can, as maybe it could get in a meaningful way. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's great. You're right.
That's
Like
what new
walking
people
simulators.
bring to gaming, like that.
Exactly.
It's
And we sort
awesome.
of used that. That question, actually, we ended up sort of talking about what are ways that the industry, culture, and even games themselves will likely change as a result of more people buying. And we've kind of hit on those already.
Mhm.
But what are some other ways you think that you'd see change in the types of games we get, but also things like the industry and the culture, how it would operate if more people got in? What are some other ways we'd see
Yeah, I mean,
change?
we've talked at length. I feel like for years, this is like exhausting to even bring up. But monetization strategies,
Yeah.
like
Oh my
what
gosh. Yeah.
works, what doesn't work, what sticks, what doesn't stick. I mean, the cell phone race to the bottom, mobile games were that, like exposing hundreds of millions of new people to video games who would never have a console or a PC to do that. And that's the smartphones in your pocket, right? And free to play came out, and like trying to monetize the game. You can only play twice a day unless you spend $5, and then you can get 3 times a day or
Such a
something.
shame. Such a shame
Yeah,
that
and
that's
so
how
like
that
that
went
happened,
down.
and then that trickled into like the AA, AAA gaming spaces, and microtransactions happened in certain games, and then people got mad and changed behaviors. But if that, they're still like, they haven't figured it out. Clearly, the industry, capitalism, they're making hand over fist cash. The gaming industry is healthy as it's ever been, and they still haven't figured out like monetization strategies. But more people coming into the market would add new data, new behaviors, new things that are appealing, and so it would shape what the next iteration of that looks like. There was a time during the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era where everyone was so focused on online engagement that every single video game almost from specific publishers would have to have an online component that was like this cheap shoehorned in experience that was awful. And then there would be like, to avoid trade-ins, there were these little inserts into the cartridge that had like a key that you had to use when you bought it new, and it would stop you from trading it in, because if you bought it used, you'd have to pay $10 to play it online, or you wouldn't play it online. And it was just this whole, it was awful. It was just a moronic way of shoehorning online engagement in, but they were trying to extend the longevity of their games, and they didn't know how to do it yet. So that's a whole and people didn't do it. Go figure. And that shaped the market. So we don't have that issue anymore. And so now it is what it is. But that's what happens. You get new people in, new ideas, new ways to engage in the medium is what I'm getting at here. New ways to buy stuff. What's appealing? It changes. So does the market, and so does
Yep.
content in games. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Good job. Good work. That's exactly what I was looking for with this question. All right. Cool. You had mentioned the monetization thing, and I think that's a big deal, right? Just the general idea of like having, if there's more, there's the obvious, right? If more people are buying games, there's more money coming in, so there's less need for predatory
That too.
monetary
Mm-hmm.
transactions,
Yeah.
necessarily. I also think of alternative funding strategies being more viable, but that's also a big question mark, right? Because it's like, it all depends on how, newcomers come in, and the likely avenues they would come in would still just likely funnel them into the current system. So I'm not quite sure about alternate funding methods, but in
Yeah.
general, I mean, yeah, you'd see more people who are, with more varied tastes. Also, I think one of the things that's great about newcomers is they don't have all these like loyalties that
Yeah.
we often
They're
have,
free agents.
and so they're much more likely to kind of hold developers and publishers to task when they do stupid or crappy things, because they're whatever, like, I don't care, like, I'm here for the good games, and if you stop providing that for me, or if you provide that in a way that is like predatory or scummy, then like whatever, I have no loyalty, I'll bounce to the next thing, right?
Yep.
Like, I think that's also kind of a valuable thing that might change if you get a lot of an injection of newcomers. And yeah, over time those newcomers become veterans, and then they have their loyalties, but at least to start with, like I feel like that if there was a huge influx of newcomers like this year, it would I think we would see a lot of different headlines in how tides
We have seen that. It
turn.
wasn't this year. It was like
Hmm.
3 years ago or 2 years ago
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the advent
fair.
of Game Pass.
Oh
The
yeah,
advent of
uh-huh.
Game Pass and how accessible that was on PC. Like the moment everyone has a PC, that you don't need to buy an Xbox and you can play games as a subscription service, like the Netflix of games. That's brand new, and still
Yeah.
like we don't even know if it's sustainable or not. Like
Oh
we don't know
yeah,
if
and we
they're
haven't
actually
even.
making money or like what the individual development studios make on allowing their game to be on Game Pass. We don't have a clue or insight except for Microsoft holding those keys to their chest. But that's
Well, and you're right. Yeah, and the technology changes too. Whether it's preemptively, the technology changes in a way that makes gaming more accessible to newcomers, so newcomers get in. I think of the Wii, right?
yeah.
The Wii was sort of a preemptive move on Nintendo's part to be like, we want to draw in more newcoming gamers, but like again, it was like it was yes, it was preemptive, but it was like a change happened, right? A change happened in
Big
Nintendo's
time. Yeah.
philosophy. And it was in an effort to attract newcomers, and it paid off, right? And then the Switch is then the ultimate result of that, right? Like, a large swath of, again, the Switch is almost as popular as the Wii in regards to like a console for non gamers.
Hmm.
And so yes, we see the technology itself change, but yeah, what you're talking about too, even is like cloud gaming is exactly where that it's a response, it's an attempt, um, again, either preemptive or reactive to draw non gamers, newcomers in by removing the technological barriers through technology. And I think that again, that only stands to benefit everyone, right? In
Hmm.
regards to the more technologies and tools available to distribute games, it may not be your preferred experience as a veteran, but as a newcomer, it might be perfect. We gave Stadia a lot of crap for its missteps, but we also gave Stadia credit where it was due in
Hmm.
attempting to do something that desperately needs to be done, which is remove the technological barriers and allow more people to access games at a reasonable price.
Hmm. As
Only
a
benefits all
subscription
of us in the
service.
long
Yep.
run. Yep,
More
exactly.
gamers.
So
Yeah.
yeah, good point.
And there's
Cool.
the advent of Twitch and its popularity amongst young folks today,
Yeah.
gamers and non gamers alike. But non gamers will watch Twitch streams of gamers doing their thing, and that increases exposure to games in general. So
Yep,
there's a
for
whole
sure.
swath of this is kind of a segue into your next question here, but like a whole new generation, Gen Z, of gamers who have been born into a world where gaming is prevalent and
Yep.
mainstream.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we were born into a world where games were available to us, but they were still so niche and new that it was not, like you said, not a prevalent mainstream thing. So yeah, Gen Z is the first generation, and then there's gonna be whole generations. Our kids' generation is one that's gonna grow up with this ubiquity of games. So yes, that was my next question. Is starts with the statement, it's inevitable. More people are going to get into gaming. Again, it's going to be gaming is already it's not just in a position where it's going to become. It already is what movies were when they exploded and became like, TVs in everyone's house, right? Like we're there now. We've reached that point.
Hmm.
There's still it's still nascent. It's still new in regards to the what's possible with the medium. In the same way that TV and film, right, like had a long way to grow. I mean, like TV now in particular is so different. The silver screen is so different than it was, 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? And I feel like, in 30, 40, 50 years, gaming is going to change too, that
Hmm.
we'll look back and be like, oh wow, it's changed so much. So I think that the change is inevitable, and that change of course is going to be driven by the new perspectives and experiences of the generations beneath us. So as a result of that, what are changes that you are hoping to see in the coming decades as more people get into gaming?
Oh man, I'm looking to. I really want kind of a teaser for one of our future episodes. I really want to see the culture shift to be more inclusive and less toxic, and I hope that the toxic voices get drowned out by the masses of newcomers that come in that are not that. And I want to
Yeah.
see what we talked about at the beginning of this show when I walk up to someone in a bar on a social situation and say, "What video games do you play?" As
Right, that's
opposed
not a
to
weird, yeah.
as,
Do you
as
play
opposed to
games
like,
at
do you
all?
play
Yeah.
games or do you consider yourself a gamer? That those questions don't even exist. It's what games are you playing? Like, what are you playing right now?
Right, because we assume that it's weird if someone's like, "Oh, I don't watch TV." Like we do assume, "Oh, you went to any shows? Like what shows have you been
Right.
watching recently?"
Yeah.
That's like a normal that's
Hmm.
become a small talk,
Yeah.
like
And like, what are you
conversation
reading right
starter.
now? Or like, what
You're
have you
right, yeah.
like? Yeah, books, right? And it could be comics, it could be novels, it could be fiction, nonfiction, whatever. Yeah, you're right. So you just walk up
Or
to
did you see
someone,
any
or
movies recently? Yeah, those are all
yeah,
small talk conversations.
yep,
Games aren't quite there yet, but they're close, and they
yeah,
will be. And like you said, in a couple decades, it'll be absolutely. You walk up to someone in a bar, hey, what games you playing? Like, right? Like that's
yep,
and not because you saw them playing something, just literally, or not because you saw a T-shirt where they got Mario on it, right? Like, no, you just
right.
walk up and it's assumed that people are playing games.
Hmm.
That I think that'll happen too. Yeah, I agree. I think that I would love to see a change in the way games. I think I hinted this earlier. I would love to see a change in which the way games are monetized. I would love to see
Yes.
gaming divorce itself from the corporate structure, not entirely, but begin to divorce itself. I feel like I don't have a lot of love for necessarily the way that Kickstarter and Patreon necessarily do their thing, but the ideas behind crowdfunding have so much promise, and it's entirely reliant on sort of a population base that is capable of sustaining it. But like, can you imagine being able to directly fund games and game development studios just because you like the games they've put out? Like, no more reliance on this corporate structure and shareholders. Like, you, the crowdfunder, are the shareholder in this case. Again,
Mm.
don't think of it necessarily as having to be tied to Kickstarter if you have hangups on Kickstarter. I really hope for a future where we can just patronize the games we like, patronize the art and entertainment we like, and have direct avenues with which to do that. That's way more possible now with the internet than it was when gaming first started. So I would love again, it would be really awesome to see people kind of take the reins of that and make that happen. It's kind of a mix between like indie games and crowdfunding that is happening now. Absolutely, it's happening now. But I would love to be seeing it happen on like a AAA quality space where it's not required for, like what if like Bethesda were to like publish a game, and maybe Bethesda's a bad example because of all the like contracts and stuff they must have. And now I'm like, okay, what is an example of a good like independent studio right now that's still doing that? I think of goodness gracious, well, From Software. I'll just hit on them because they do walk that line of like not necessarily being tied to a publisher. So like imagine if From Software, their next game, they were like, screw it, screw Sony, screw Activision, like we're going directly to the players, fund our next game, boom. Whether they use Kickstarter or not, or Patreon, like boom, fund our next game. Like how cool would that be to be like, obviously you get a copy at whatever level you contribute at the $50 level, you're getting a copy of the game. So either way, you're getting
Hmm.
a copy of the game. And then there's like the contributions above that, you can get other extra rewards, but those things go towards like printing and manufacturing the games, right? Maybe they don't. Maybe they do it digital only, so they don't have to worry about the manufacturing costs. And then if they reach a certain stretch goal in donations, then they manufacture like that. Like I saw that happen with Brandon Sanderson's like that book series, right? Like the
Yeah.
books that he did, the secret ones, and like
Hmm.
it blew up. And I think it began to open people's minds to the possibility of being like, oh, we don't need Amazon for this anymore. Like we don't, right? Like, and Sanderson even himself said that in interviews. He's like, Amazon almost killed my income for a month because they pulled my books. Them having so much control over
Oof.
that is maddening.
Yep.
And the readers don't want that. They're not doing it for the readers, the fans. So like why let them have so much control over this? I think it's the same with publishers. Like, let's cut publishers out of this. Let's cut those shareholders out of this. Activision shareholders, I'm sick of them making all the choices.
Yeah.
I want the developers and the player, right? The people making the game and the consumers should be the ones
Hmm.
making the choices about how these things get funded. So let's do it, right? Like that's what I want to
Yeah.
see. That was a huge rant, and it kind of like came to me today while we were listening. While I was thinking about this, I was like, yeah, that's the change I want to see.
That'd be a steep mountain to climb.
I know,
The
but it
problem with
only
that,
could happen. It only could happen, and I know it's not a completely foolproof plan, but
yeah,
it would be something that I think would be realistic, but only if there was a huge influx of people that also wanted that, and were willing to make it happen.
yeah. The other side of that coin, going back to the Game Pass subscription model, whether it be Amazon Luna, Stadia, Game Pass, whatever, they would be the studios that could take the risk to get an independent game on their service, and that would give them exposure.
Right, of course.
So kind of the
Yeah.
same idea, but instead of like a developer studio going to the crowd for the money, it's like Microsoft is funding this studio to make whatever they want to get it on Game Pass. And so it's a
Yeah,
way, it's just a
yeah,
different way of monetization. It's happening. Like it's a new thing because this whole subscription idea is new. And we're seeing a lot of really cool indie game developers like do awesome experiences as it is. But these new marketplaces are kind of I think what I'm getting at is your vision is being realized in a way that you didn't articulate just now, but it is
sure.
happening.
No, yeah. Well, I
Well,
think that it would be and we had a whole episode on crowdfunding, and what happens with the independent new coming developers is that they don't get the thing off the ground, and then people
right.
waste their money on nothing. That is, of
Exactly.
course, obviously the downside of the crowdfunded thing. But what I was talking about was not actually independent developers. I was talking about like actual people who have been doing this for years, big name studios, untethering themselves from the corporate structure and going directly to the players. They've proven they can do it, and they will get
Yeah.
a product out, right? Like all you got to do is
But will they get
cut out the
paid?
middleman.
That's the question.
That's the risk, of course, but
Right.
like I feel like
Yeah.
it's the technology is enabling it in a way that is more reasonable than ever before. And I think that especially for companies that have proven themselves like From Software, and of course like in my dream the very very biggest of the big names, developer wise, uh yeah, they would have a big enough base that they would get their games funded easy peasy.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as Brandon Sanderson, right? Like he was able to do it because he had such a great following,
Yeah.
and because he's put out great products in the past, right? That's all you need. We don't need the publishers. We don't. I don't think we need the publishers, but that is
Mhm.
a whole topic for a different time. We could have a whole discussion about that. But like, I think that again, tethering it to the idea of change brought about by more people getting involved. That is like, you want to light that fire. You want to start that revolution. It starts with just a massive influx of people. It's going to be hard to change the minds of the existing gamers, right? We are just so used to things
Right.
being the way it is. But
Mhm.
newcomers, y'all could come in and be like, "This is how I want my games made."
Yeah. I mean, you think like to go to your point here, a software engineer who's not a gamer, never involved in games, makes whatever web apps or something, knows what they're doing, solid coder, meets someone who's kind of into games, not super coder, but also has great creative vision. And you put the two together, and suddenly this coder who's not a gamer is now a gamer, met with this person, and they create a new game, and it just sets the world on fire. And they have to fund it through means that is new, and like Kickstarter or whatever, or like something different, and it ends up being amazing. Or this coder gets a job with and works their way up all the way to the top of the company, and maybe C-level adjacent, and can start making corporate level decisions and add new perspective and fresh ideas, innovation into business models. And that happens. And yeah, that's how you get new ideas, new
I
gamers
love it.
coming in.
Yep,
Yeah.
I love it. Cool. All right. So as unlikely as it is, based on the last question we just talked about, what if nothing changes? What is our current trajectory? What I asked this question to say basically like, it's almost to highlight what are the things that need to change now, but like more from the perspective of like what does the gaming industry look like in 10-20 years if nothing changes, if it still operates and is the way it is now? What are we basically going to miss out on, aside from obviously the unrealized experiences out there that will never come to pass because people never demand them? What else doesn't change that should
Hmm.
probably or possibly change?
Yeah. I mean, we're
Monetization,
on
obviously, right? We'd already talked about
yeah.
monetization, but like this predatory monetization is just going to get worse and worse and worse because the shareholders are used to being able to get this, and they don't care about the experience. They just care about what lines their pockets. So like
Right.
the race, like you said, the race to the bottom. We've already seen it happen. It's already happened. It's just going to keep going, right? Like they're going to keep finding ways to try to screw us out of our money at the expense, at both twofold expense, right? The expense of the people who are like predisposed to fall for that, and then also the expense of people who want the good experience and are losing out on it because we're no longer their paying customers for all they care, right?
Right.
We're just a means to an end to make the game more popular for the whales, to attract the whales is like what it boils down
Yeah.
to. It's like that's going to keep happening. It's like we may have sort of won a few battles, but I don't know if we win the war long term on those
Mhm.
things. The NFT thing it's kind of
Oh
started to die
man.
down in the zeitgeist, thank God. But like it was just another example of like it flared up as a like
A monetization
because
strategy.
because it was another monetization strategy and they saw dollar signs and that's all
Yep.
they see. So
Yeah.
until people come in and change that, the
Right.
more voices there that hate that will change that. But
It's
yeah,
great that you even mentioned that because that is a good talking point about the state of the industry now. We have enough people in the industry to speak up against that awful tactic that business-minded folks who have in the past made decisions and executed them regardless of what anyone thought have now all like shifted gears away from the NFT stuff because of the ridiculously loud gaming industry. And that's not just the gamers, but the journalists, the
Journalists, yeah.
podcasts, the influencers, but the people that work for them, the actual developers themselves, the leaders of these studios, the leaders of the publishers, like talking to like word got
I feel
around
like
hard.
January, nobody knew what NFT was, and at
Yeah.
least the gaming industry. And then now, like just 6 months later, it's like it's now a dirty word. Now you say NFT to a gamer, and they bare their teeth at you.
Yeah, right.
Right. Like,
And
and that's
so
great.
yeah,
That's just
this is
yeah,
where we want to
exactly.
be. So we're kind of headed in a good direction. So in that regard, like, well, we've also seen a lot of other micro changes in the industry, like stuff being like as specific games come out and the audience gets really loud about specific. Gran Turismo 7 is kind of what's on my mind with Sony. Polyphony Digital had released some things to like increase the amount of dollars cars cost at also decreasing the amount of in-game credits you get for specific stuff that people were doing, and everyone just went off and said you're price gouging, you're trying to add all this extra time to incentivize purchasing real dollars in-game content, et cetera, et cetera. And they've patched the game since and like made it better and apologized for it, and we're like, yep, we realized that this was not a good move. And that's kind of where that happens now. We're in an industry where that happens. And I think that's really cool. Battlefield 2142 completely lambasted like, and Colin Moriarty, he was talking about Babylon's Fall. There's one person playing it on Steam. And like these things happen. And it's cool that the technology and the infrastructure and the community and the communication mediums that we have can cause change. Like Square Enix will never do whatever they did with Babylon's Fall again because that's awful. So we'll get better stuff out of Square Enix. That's going to happen, right? Like that's how this works. So
Right.
if nothing about that aspect of the gaming industry changed, we wouldn't really be in a bad spot. I think we're headed in the right direction with that.
I
Just
hope
big,
so.
big positive.
I just think that the way that the fact they keep trying.
Yeah, I know.
I know that
It'll
like
never end.
it's sort of a battle, right? But and maybe it won't end with more people. But I feel like at least if more people get involved, there's the opportunity for, like I said, alternate. And it doesn't have to be necessarily what I said about crowdfunding, but there are alternate avenues with which to subvert those attempts, subvert those subversions.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think also about just the kinds of experiences we get, right? Like the more people, if a bunch of people, again, if there are people out there, there's a large population out there who probably disdain the idea of Fortnite. And many
Right.
of those people are non-gamers. Imagine if all those people who are non-gamers got into gaming and got into a whole different experience, right? Then that experience might rival Fortnite, right? So I mean, like, so we'll even it even has the possibility. So what I mean, the reason I highlight that is if nothing changes, we continue to get the same kinds of experiences we've been getting. Like I there are some I don't have a complete disdain for competitive shooters, but like there's a reason why like competitive shooters and esports are as popular as they are is because they all share the same DNA that traces all the way back to certain games from the 90s, right? And that's not a problem if you like those experiences, that's fine, but like they also are the trajectory of experiences that we get and will continue to get, unless a large number of people were to join that didn't like that and wanted something else, and then there might be rival experiences. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think does that make sense? Does that
Yeah.
track? It's all ultimately saying that if nothing changes, then we just are ultimately going to continue to just get that esport experience, and that will be the big money makers, right? The
Yep.
League of Legends, the Overwatch, the Call of Duty, like those are. But like, imagine if there was a huge influx of people who just freaking love fighting games, and then fighting games were the next big esport beyond what they are now, right? I know there's like Evo and stuff, but it's
Yeah.
comparatively, it's just such a small player base. But then what if that became to rival Fortnite, right? Like that would
Yeah.
be a whole different world of esports. And it would be great and it would be awesome. And I certainly would probably tune in more to watch people, like to watch the biggest competitors go after that. But that only happens if people join who again, it's like you probably, if you're listening to this and you're a non-gamer and don't like games, there's probably several games that come to your mind, and they're probably the most popular games, right? Like, are there
Yep.
probably, there's a likely chance that they're the
Minecraft,
most popular
Fortnite.
games, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason they're popular is because the people buying in. So it's like if you were to take the time and effort, not meant to shame you. This isn't meant to shame you, but it is meant to sort of highlight the fact that, like, were you to go in and be like, okay, then I'm going to find an experience I like, and were people like you to do that on a massive level, it's like you probably wouldn't disdain games and gaming as much, because there would be better experiences out there because of your participation in it. It's like, it's a circular thing. And I understand, like, I understand that the circle works in the other direction too, right? There's not a bunch of people doing that, so therefore the games get perpetuated. And that's why I'm hitting on this trajectory. Like, that's where our trajectory leads, is we just continue to get that same competitive esport experience.
Yeah.
Ad nauseum forever.
Yep.
So yeah, that's I think what we're hitting at. So we want to hear what your thoughts are. What change could be brought by more people participating in this thing called gaming? Is it important, or is it just sort of like, okay, yeah, you're stating the obvious, but that's not the way things are. Don't talk about it. End your podcast and stop bothering my ears, you say, after listening to an hour and 14 minutes of content from us. But we still want to hear it. We want to hear that thought. We want to hear how much time we wasted of yours. That probably brings us, at least me, a kind of cruel joy. So Termite, can you remind the good listeners where they can share their appreciation or disdain of us?
Yeah.
Where they can share that in relation to this topic, preferably on the internet.
Let us know why what is the name of that game? Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem's sequel that was kickstarted on Kickstarter. And let me know how disappointed you are as well that failed. And you can do that over at 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website with links to all of our social media platforms and our Discord. They're all there. And you can go find all of our RSS feed links and podcast platforms, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, etc. We have new episodes that launch every single week, Monday at midnight, and they are family friendly. And don't forget, also, I don't always highlight this, but we do have a Twitch channel, and we do stream once a month. So keep an eye on twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash. You can interact with us live on chat while we play games. We have been reviewing at least something every single month so far, at least for the last couple of months. We had to miss May, and we're going to hit June, and we'll have to miss July, but we'll hit August. So it's hit or miss, but at least pay attention to our social feeds, and you can find all of that at 80bitpodsmash.com.
All right. Well, our next episode, don't worry, this was the last of this series. If you loved it or hated it, don't worry. We got something new coming next week, and it will be just good. Next week, we're going to talk about this idea of games that have... So at some point, 3D gaming came out, whereas before, everything was 2D. But now we can render games in fully realized 3D worlds. That happened in around the mid-90s. It was lots of different games, but the big one, of course, being Mario 64. We talk about how legendary that was all the time on the show. So then over the intervening decades, we saw lots of games attempt to make the jump, right? From 2D to 3D. And some did it beautifully, masterfully. We still play those games and look forward to them every year. Some, not so much. Why? We're going to talk about that. What the jump to 3D, 2D, and 3D, and which games made it, which games didn't. And that is our episode next week. So we'll see you then to talk about that.
Sounds exciting. We'll see you next week.